Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Attorney General, I know there's been a lot of talk about grants. I hate to bring you through this again, but it's really important to my state. New Jersey is one of the top 4 donor states in America, which means our taxpayers, Americans, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, millions of people send more money down here than we get back in relative to all the other states in the nation except for 3 others. We've been talking a lot about different grants. I want to be very specific about Office of Justice Program grants. There were $35 million worth of grants that were approved in a bipartisan way in this committee, grants that invest in things that are really vital to the public safety of our community. I know, again, we are in a room full of people who want to see crime go down. Republicans and Democrats, law enforcement officers have spoken to the urgency of these programs which deal with school violence, which divert people into substance abuse and treatment and supportive services. Community violence intervention programs, again, bipartisan programs that this committee really worked hard on this. I've heard what you've said to others on the committee. I heard what you said to Patty Murray in an appropriations committee, that members should reach out to you if they want those grants reinstated. I've written letters, but I am hoping that you and I can have a conversation. $35 million of frozen funding for public safety that the people of New Jersey, Democrats, Republicans, and Independents, really invested in those resources. Those programs and those nonprofits who were expecting those grants often made outlays and are now really in a lurch. Can we talk about those grants and the restoration of them, please?
Yeah, and Senator Booker, I had stated earlier that yes, we did terminate grants. We have an appeal process. We have turned some back on. We are appealing. We are looking at some. Some we have denied. Some are still pending. I believe we have multiple appeals pending with New Jersey, and I would be happy to sit down with you and look at those appeals. I believe one is with the city of New Jersey. I know there are multiple ones pending, but of course, I would be happy to sit down with you or any senator or any House member and look at grants that have been terminated. I've been doing that, and I would welcome that.
But I will be the first one you sit down with, correct?
Absolutely. I'd love to sit down with you on that. I'll look at those tomorrow, Senator Booker.
Thank you very much.
As citizens, we have a responsibility to pay attention, to ask questions, to demand better from our leaders. We can't just tune out when things get complicated or partisan. Democracy requires engaged citizens who hold their government accountable. So what did you think of this hearing? Were you satisfied with the Attorney General's responses, or do you think she should have been more forthcoming? Do you believe the National Guard deployments are justified, or do they raise constitutional concerns? Should the Qatar jet gift be subject to more scrutiny? And what about the Epstein files? Do you think we're getting the full story? These are the questions we need to keep asking until we get satisfactory answers. These are the issues that will define the balance of power in our government for years to come. Thank you for taking the time to watch this analysis and to think seriously about these important issues. In a time when so much political content is designed to confirm our biases and inflame our emotions, we hope this provided a more thoughtful examination of what's really at stake. If you found this analysis valuable, we encourage you to share it with others who care about constitutional governance and government accountability. These conversations need to happen not just in Senate hearing rooms, but in living rooms and coffee shops across America. Stay informed, stay engaged, and never stop asking questions. That's how we preserve the democratic republic the founders gave us. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. What you just witnessed wasn't just another Senate hearing. This was a clash between two very different visions of how the Department of Justice should operate under the Trump administration. Senator Cory Booker from New Jersey came prepared with receipts, and Attorney General Pam Bondi had to answer some extremely uncomfortable questions. Let's break down exactly what happened here, because the implications go far beyond this single hearing. The $35 million question. Senator Booker opened with something that might sound bureaucratic, but is actually deeply personal to millions of New Jersey residents. $35 million in Office of Justice Program grants, approved in a bipartisan manner, suddenly frozen. These aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. We're talking about school violence prevention programs, substance abuse treatment, community violence intervention initiatives that local nonprofits were counting on. New Jersey is one of the top 4 donor states in America. Think about that for a moment. New Jersey taxpayers send more money to Washington than they get back compared to almost every other state. And now, programs they were promised, programs they paid for, are being held hostage. Do you think that's fair to the people who fund the federal government? Attorney General Bondi's response was diplomatic, but revealed something important. She mentioned an appeals process, said some grants have been restored, some denied, some still pending. But here's what stood out. She said she'd be happy to sit down with Senator Booker. Not that she'd fix the problem, not that she'd review the situation immediately, just that she'd sit down and talk about it. Senator Booker didn't let that slide. He made it crystal clear. I will be the first one you sit down with, correct? And Bondi agreed. But notice the pattern here. Multiple appeals pending, some approved, some denied. Who's making these decisions? On what basis? What criteria are being used? The Mayor Baraka controversy. Then Senator Booker shifted to something that should concern every American who believes in the rule of law. Newark Mayor Ras Baraka was arrested after seeking access to a detention center to conduct oversight. Let that sink in. A mayor trying to do his job, providing oversight of a federal facility in his city, gets arrested. The charges were so weak that a federal judge called them embarrassing and a worrisome misstep. The judge actually said federal prosecutors serve justice itself, not political agendas. When was the last time you heard a federal judge use language that strong against federal prosecutors? But here's where it gets really troubling. A recently released video shows a federal agent saying the decision to arrest Mayor Baraka came per the Deputy Attorney General of the United States. That means this wasn't a decision made by agents in the field based on what they saw happening. This was directed from Washington, from Main Justice, from the top. Do you see the problem here? When arrest decisions for local elected officials are being made by political appointees in Washington, rather than by law enforcement on the ground, what does that tell you about the politicization of the Justice Department? Attorney General Bondi couldn't discuss it because it's an ongoing matter. Fair enough from a legal standpoint. But Senator Booker made it clear he's going to submit questions for the record about how these decisions are being made. Not about the case itself, but about the process. And that's exactly the right approach.
The resource allocation problem. Now we get to what might be the most significant issue raised in this entire exchange. Senator Booker presented data, not opinions. According to the White House's own documents and conservative think tank Cato Institute, the Department of Justice has reassigned over 7,000 law enforcement personnel away from their primary duties. Let me repeat that. Over 7,000 federal agents who were investigating drug traffickers, prosecuting child pornography cases, targeting high-value white-collar criminals, have been reassigned to immigration enforcement. This includes 1,778 ATF agents. The White House itself admits they diverted 45% of agents in 25 FBI field offices to work on immigration full-time. Think about what's not getting done while these agents are doing immigration work. 11,000 Americans have been killed by firearms just this year. Drug trafficking organizations are operating across the country. Child predators are online right now. White-collar criminals are stealing billions. But we've reassigned thousands of federal agents to immigration enforcement. What do you think should be the priority? Is this the best use of limited federal law enforcement resources? Attorney General Bondi's response was interesting. She emphasized that agents are working tirelessly on their day jobs and with Homeland Security. She said the work hasn't been sacrificed, but Senator Booker presented specific numbers from official sources showing massive reassignments. Both things can't be true simultaneously. The dismantling of key programs. Senator Booker then listed program after program that's been eliminated or drastically reduced. The Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force, which fought transnational organized crime, dissolved. The Community Relations Service, which has operated for 60 years, responding to communities experiencing conflict or violence, dissolved. VOCA and VAWA grants supporting survivors of sexual assault and human trafficking rescinded. The public integrity section went from 36 full-time prosecutors to just 2. 2 prosecutors handling public corruption for the entire United States. At a time when public corruption is a serious problem across the country, both Democrats and Republicans agree on that, we've essentially abandoned federal prosecution of corrupt officials. Attorney General Bondi claimed the work hasn't been slashed, that cases are just being handled by individual U.S. attorney offices instead of a centralized unit in D.C. But here's the question. If you decentralize something that requires specialized expertise and coordination, doesn't that inherently weaken it? Do local U.S. attorney offices have the same resources, expertise, and ability to pursue complex public corruption cases that cross state lines? The antitrust concern. Senator Booker's final question touched on antitrust enforcement, specifically the Hewlett-Packard Enterprise and Juniper Networks merger. Reports suggest that political appointees overruled career antitrust staff to approve a $14 billion merger. This is significant because antitrust is one of the few truly bipartisan issues in Congress right now. Corporate concentration is increasing, market power is consolidating. Both progressive Democrats and conservative Republicans are concerned about monopolistic practices. Yet there are allegations that career experts who raised concerns about this massive merger were overruled by political appointees. Attorney General Bondi said it's a pending matter and deferred to the Assistant Attorney General for Antitrust. But the question remains, are antitrust decisions being made based on economic analysis and legal standards, or are political considerations playing a role? Attorney General Bondi ended with an emotional appeal that we need to acknowledge. Federal agents are working without pay during a government shutdown. FBI, DEA, ATF agents are on the streets right now doing dangerous work, not receiving paychecks. That's unconscionable, regardless of your political views. But does that fact excuse the policy decisions being questioned? Does it address the concerns about grant freezes, resource reallocation, program eliminations, and potential politicization of prosecutorial decisions? In my opinion, these are separate issues that both deserve attention. This hearing exchange revealed fundamental tensions in how the Department of Justice operates under this administration. On one side, you have concerns about maintaining traditional DOJ independence, protecting established programs, ensuring resources go to the highest priorities, and preventing politicization of prosecutorial decisions. On the other side, you have an administration that believes the previous approach wasn't working, that reorganization is necessary, that immigration enforcement deserves more resources, and that the Attorney General has the authority to make these decisions. Who's right? That depends on what you think the priority should be. But what's undeniable is that major changes are happening rapidly, with significant consequences for communities across the country. Senator Booker represents a state that's a net contributor to the federal government, watching programs they paid for get frozen. He represents a city whose mayor was arrested on charges a federal judge called embarrassing. He's watching federal resources get redirected away from issues his constituents care deeply about. Attorney General Bondi represents an administration with a mandate to change how things operate, to prioritize immigration enforcement, to reorganize how the Department of Justice functions. She believes these changes will ultimately make Americans safer. The question is, who gets to decide? And how do we ensure those decisions are made transparently, with proper oversight, based on evidence rather than politics? Senator Booker made clear he's submitting questions for the record. He's requesting meetings about the frozen grants. He's asking for the Attorney General to testify before the Antitrust Subcommittee. These aren't just rhetorical gestures. This is how congressional oversight actually works. Will those meetings happen? Will the questions get answered? Will the grants be restored? Will we get transparency about how prosecutorial decisions are being made? That remains to be seen. But one thing is certain. This conversation is far from over. The tension between executive authority and congressional oversight, between policy priorities and resource allocation, between political direction and prosecutorial independence, these are fundamental questions about how our government operates. What do you think should happen? Should the grants be restored? Should federal agents be reassigned to immigration enforcement? Should there be more transparency about prosecutorial decisions?
These aren't abstract questions. They have real consequences for real people in communities across America. The Senate hearing room might seem distant from your daily life, but the decisions being debated there affect public safety in your neighborhood, the resources available to your local law enforcement, the programs that serve your community. This matters, and it deserves your attention.